So what we want to be able to do is to get that to a very clear and a very compelling picture, a single picture that tells the story, and then only 3 bullets, because our brains think in threes. 1, 2, 3, ready, set, go. 3 strikes, you're out. So 3 bullet points on a PowerPoint, and you also want to align that with storytelling. There are 3 acts in a storytelling play.
You're listening to Kerry Lutz's Financial Survival Network, where you get valuable information you just can't find anywhere else. To thrive in today's trying times, you need the Financial Survival Network, now more than ever. Go to financialsurvivalnetwork.com and get your free newsletter and gift. Financial Survival Network, now more than ever.
And welcome. You are listening to watching the Financial Survival Network. I'm your host, Kerry Lutz. Hey, it's 10/10/23. Don't usually mention the dates, but when they're significant, it's worth mentioning. Right now, W. Craig Reed is with us, and he's written books. He's a best-selling New York Times author. That doesn't mean Amazon for a day. And he teaches you, medium, small businesses, marketing. He's famous for just 12 bullet points in a story, and you can close. Bill, great to have you on the show. So tell us about this 12 bullet points and you close.
You bet. Well, storytelling is something that virtually every executive that I've ever talked to, and I've talked to quite a few as an executive consultant for helping launch what became an E5000 consulting firm. However, getting that right is difficult. When I was a budding author, I went to a writing conference and I thought I was pretty good, but at the end of it, I was voted most improved. So that says a lot about how I was when I came through the door. And quite often when we're trying to tell stories in a corporate setting, especially when we're talking about PowerPoints, we want to put Tolstoy's War and Peace on a page. And as small fonts, you're asking someone to engage their logical brain to read all of that rather than trying to impact them emotionally or instinctually. So what we want to be able to do is to get that to a very clear and a very compelling picture, a single picture that tells the story, and then only 3 bullets, because our brains think in threes. 1, 2, 3, ready, set, go. 3 strikes, you're out. So 3 bullet points on a PowerPoint, and you also want to align that with storytelling. There are 3 acts in a storytelling play. However, Act 2 is divided into 2. So that's where we get 4 slides, 4 pictures, 3 bullet points per slide, 12 bullet points. That's how we get there.
Okay. So I totally agree with what you're saying that people don't buy rationally. They buy emotionally, but they don't like to admit that, right?
That is true. We smell a new car leather and the logic goes out the door. This is what neuroscience has validated really over the past decade or so. This comes from a number of neuroscientists. Remotely me's chief science officer is a PhD neuroscientist. I forced myself to get a Harvard neuroscience certification just so I could talk with them. Didn't help me much, but what we now know is that 90% of our decisions are not logical. We've got really 3 parts of our brain. It's called the triune brain. Theory, logical, emotional, instinctual. And our logical brain likes numbers, words, and logic. And it's only responsible for about 10% of our decision making, even though we'd like to think we're rational beings. The emotional, instinctual brain likes pictures and video, and that's responsible for 90% of our decision making. So that's where that comes from. We thought we were logical, but we're not.
Okay, so yeah, and at least women admit that they're not logical, but men don't admit it, right?
That's very true. And quite often, because of that, women can actually be tremendous decision makers because they have learned how to balance that properly and learn how to make intelligent decisions, even though they may be driven by our emotional instinctual brains. And so it's whereas men aren't maybe quite as good at that because we deny it. We kind of think that perhaps we are a bit more logical, and that's really not the case.
All right, I'll buy that. So when you want to sell people, so yes, I agree with you. PowerPoints, people will try to put War and Peace on a slide. You really only want an image and a couple of bullet points at the most. Sometimes just an image itself is going to do it. But tell us about storytelling, because in podcasting, YouTubing, the ones that do the best are the ones that tell the stories and tell them the most effectively. What's your key to effective storytelling?
Again, I was very fortunate that I got to learn from some of the best. And that includes some good friends, James Rollins, who's a #1 New York Times bestselling author, Grant Blackwood, who's written quite a few of the newer Tom Clancy books after Tom passed away, and Joan Johnston, who has written millions. He's got many, many books, but millions of readers. She has 8 ways to open and close a chapter. But that can also include a chapter in whatever business story that we're telling. So the key is not only the simplicity, but also following the right structure and also a few tricks of the trade. Now, think of The Wizard of Oz. Okay, The Wonderful Wizard of Oz, written by L. Frank Baum back in 1900, is a excellent blueprint of how to properly tell a story. It's got the 3 acts, and you start with Dorothy in her ordinary world. And then she gets thrust by the tornado into the land of Oz. And that brings her into Act 2. And there she has to go through all of her tests. She has some cohorts and a mentor, which is the Oz. She's battling the flying monkeys. In the books, it's a pack of wolves. And then at the end, she brings into the home the magic elixir, which is really wisdom. There's no place like home. And that's the 3rd act. Now, from a neuroscience perspective, this is where it gets interesting. The 1st act appeals more to our emotional brain. We want to connect with the protagonist and others. And then the Act 2 part is more instinctual, right? We're battling the flying monkeys, so all these risks and the obstacles. And then the 3rd act is more logical. That's where Sherlock Holmes walks into the stage and logically puts all the pieces together. All right, so think of it from that perspective. And from a business perspective, that's the way we should tell our stories. Starting more with an emotional connection. Virtually all sales methodologies tell you that. And then move into more risk-taking. And what are the consequences? What are the concerns the customer has? And then it's more logical. What's your ROI? What kind of solutions can we offer to prevent all those risks we talk about in Act 2? That's how you would tell a business story.
All right. So your method, does it just apply to one-on-one sales, or how do you do that to a mass audience?
Same principle applies. So you may have 10 or 12 decision makers in a large business-to-business account that you're dealing with. That's what the studies show us. And again, you're best to have that story structure. So let's say you're presenting to an audience of 5 or 6 in a room. You want your PowerPoint, for example, to flow in that direction. You don't want to start off with all of your accolades. You don't want to start off with all the awards that you won. The story's not about you. The protagonist of the story is your customer. So you should start with that. Don't start with an agenda, right? Most novels might have chapters and so forth, but everybody skips over that. They want to go right to page 1 and they want to dive right into the story. So dive right into the story and tell the story. Tell the story from a prospect's or a customer's perspective. Here's what we did for John Doe at XYZ Company. Here are the problems that were for you. Here were the situation they were in. And walk them through that story.
Okay. So you tell them the story, and hopefully their tears are in their eyes by the time you finish the end. And how do you close them?
So again, in Act 3, we become more logical. And closing is really all about how well you do Act 2. There's 2 parts to Act 2, as I mentioned. Each part is about 25% of your story. So Act 1 is about 25%. Act 2 is 50% divided into 2. And then Act 3 is 25%. The key is the latter part of Act Two. That's the part that most sales and marketing people forget or skip over. And that's where you have to raise the stakes. The Challenger sale calls it challenging your prospects. It's showing them what the consequences and the costs of inaction or wrong action are. Then in Act Three, you can use that to close, because you can say, remember in Act Two, we said it could cost you $1 gazillion if you do this wrong. Well, here's how we can prevent that. Here are the logical ways to do that. And you give them 3 choices. Choice 1, do nothing. Well, that will cost you $1 gazillion. Choice 2, an inferior solution. And maybe only half $1 gazillion. It's still a big cost. And choice 3 is the most logical solution. Again, feeling the logical brain. Here's why. Here's the ROI. Here's the case studies, etc. And that's how you close them, by showing them that your logical choice is the best, and here's why. Compared to the other 2 choices that they have, only 3 choices, not more than that, because our brains can't process more than 3.
Right. Okay. I like it. So tell us the story of a client of yours who came to you, who didn't know what they were doing, and now they're bringing in buckets of money.
You bet. I'll provide you with an example of an actual customer for Remotely Me. You may have heard of an organization called Better Homes and Gardens Real Estate.
Sure.
Okay. They had about an 85% customer failure, and really struggling with it because it was costing a ton of money to be able to onboard them and train them and all of that. And so they came to Remotely Me to help them figure out how to solve that problem. And one of the key solutions, none of their solutions offered for sales and marketing, which would help their agents in that respect, but also from a recruiting perspective. And what we did was look at their brain profiles using this neuroscience and determine that there were 3 key profiles that seemed to relate to the best success, to their top performers.
Mm-hmm.
Now they can pre-assess these agents, who want to be real estate agents, to say, look, you may not be the right fit for this position, but you could be right for this position. And the way we did that now with the sales approach for them is just exactly that. It's now more of a logical approach at the end and more emotional up front, and then the risks in the middle. Okay, so and that's how they can also train their real estate agents with sales training courses to say, let's say you're dealing with a customer and they want to move to a new neighborhood. You want to find out why they're in their current neighborhood. Why do they want to move? What's their current situation? Where are their kids? What kind of school are they in? All of these things, so you have that knowledge. And then bring in the risks. Whoa, well, if you go to this neighborhood over here, school system's not rated as high. Your kids may not be educated as well. This neighborhood over here, risk factors, more crime. You don't want to get ripped off, do you? On and on. Well, this neighborhood over here is ideal, and here's why. Right? This is a logical choice for you, customer. So now these real estate agents not only can be screened so you get the right people, but also taught in training on how to do it.
That's very cool. All right. So what kind of results did they achieve?
So again, we were able to assess their top performers, but also their middle performers. And I think that's the key. Most organizations realize that they can't always get 300 hitters. Everybody wants a 300 better hitter on their team, but they're expensive and they're hard to find. Your better bet is to find some 200 hitters and teach them how to become 250 hitters. Right? If you've got 3 or 4 of 300 hitters, but all the rest of your hitters are 150 hitters, you're not going to win any World Series. But if you can get your team up to maybe 200, 250 hitters along with those others, and that's the key. And so now those are the results that we're seeing from this approach, is the ability to show actual measured results of when someone starts here, there may be at this capability. They have these we measure what we call soft skills. There's 8 key soft skills. And your soft skills are 70% here, 80% here, 5% here. take these courses, do these things, and we can bring those soft skills up as matched against your actual best optimal career choice, right? And also trust factors are key. Those that have higher trust factors will also perform better in an organization. Tons of studies on this have been done as well.
Okay. And so the net result?
Net results are dramatic improvements in not only, reduction in not having onboarding customers or agents that will not succeed properly, guiding them to the right thing. So hundreds of thousands in reduction in onboarding and expense costs, as well as increases in productivity capabilities because the right people are in the right seats and they are properly skilled and trained to be able to close better.
And I'd imagine they had less turnover as well, right?
Far less turnover. We're finding that in many organizations, it's not just turnover, it's called quiet quitting. And we're seeing upwards of 80% either fail or they quiet quit, which is even worse because they're just not productive.
Yeah, they kind of self-deport, if you will. So, all right, sounds really interesting. Tell us, how do we find you? How do we get your book?
remotelyme.com. And there's also a link to the book up there. It's called Start With Who. It's been praised by Ken Blanchard, says it's fascinating and thought-provoking. Also, a VP from Workday says it's the next generation beyond. Simon Sinek, Start With Why, and the Challenger Sale. But it has all these concepts in it, the neuroscience, the 12 bullets, all of that in it.
All right. Well, hey, if you got a question for Bill or myself, email me, kl@kerrylutz.com. We'll get you an answer. And in the show notes to this interview, you will get a link to remotelyme.com. Just click it, take you right to Bill's site. And while you're there at our site, sign up for your free newsletter. Bill, been a total pleasure. Thanks so much for stopping by.
Thank you. Appreciate it.
Thanks for listening to Kerry Lutz's Financial Survival Network, your solution to today's trying times. For the latest, go to financialsurvivalnetwork.com. Financial Survival Network, now more than ever.